Every presidential assassination attempts that changed America's history, from Trump to Lincoln. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Donald Trump. They came for the flags, the speeches, the music, and left with blood on their hands and history rewritten in seconds. No one expected gunfire. No one expected a president to bleed again. On July 13, 2024, former U.S. President Donald Trump stood on stage at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. It was a typical campaign stop. Supporters packed the field, music blared, and Trump had just begun speaking about border statistics when a bullet sliced through the air. He flinched, grabbed his ear, and dropped behind the lectern. Blood streaked his face. The crowd screamed. The gunman, identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, had positioned himself on the rooftop of a nearby building 150 yards from the stage, outside the designated security perimeter. Just minutes earlier, local law enforcement had spotted a man on the roof and attempted to intercept, but were forced to retreat when Crooks aimed his AR-15 style rifle directly at them. The Secret Service had received a tip about a suspicious individual but failed to track or neutralize the threat in time. Crooks opened fire, unleashing 8 rounds. Trump was struck once, a graze to the right ear, but survived. A man named Corey Compertor, a 50-year-old father and former fire chief, was not as lucky. Shot while shielding his wife and daughter, he died at the scene. 2 other attendees were critically wounded. Within 42 seconds, Crooks was killed by a counter-sniper team from the Secret Service. Investigators quickly descended on Crooks' home and devices. Despite extensive searches, his motive remained disturbingly vague. He had practiced at a gun range the day before. His phone contained images of various political figures, including Trump and Biden, but no manifesto, no clear allegiance. He had no criminal record, no known affiliation with extremist groups. He was a registered Republican who once donated to a Democrat-linked fundraising platform. He searched major depressive disorder and received packages marked hazardous material in the weeks prior. The fallout was immediate and immense. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle, under bipartisan fire, resigned 10 days later. Multiple agents were suspended. President Biden called for calm, warning against politicizing the attack. "We cannot let our divisions become our destruction," he stated. Still, conspiracy theories surged online, blaming foreign powers, domestic rivals, even suggesting inside involvement. The nation had been forced to confront a bitter truth: political violence was no longer a distant shadow, but a present threat. There is never a right time for complacency. If you attend a public gathering, don't assume safety, scan your surroundings, identify exits, and take note of anything unusual. Tragedy moves faster than security can respond. And warning signs are often ignored until it's too late. It wasn't the bullet that nearly changed history, it was the blind spot. A blind spot in security, in communication, and perhaps, in how seriously we take the cost of division. What we overlook may one day aim back at us. Number 2. Barack Obama. Hate doesn't always scream, it whispers, plans, and hides behind hotel curtains and usernames. In 2008, as America prepared to elect its first black president, shadows moved behind the scenes. Just days before Barack Obama's Democratic nomination speech in Denver, 3 men, Sean Adolph, Nathan Johnson, and Theron Gartrell, were arrested with high-powered rifles, camouflage clothing, wigs, and crystal meth. One of the rifles was fitted with a silencer. Their goal: to kill Obama from a distance of 750 yards. One of the suspects reportedly said, "No N***Gare should ever live in the White House." The FBI initially believed the plot was serious. But later, federal prosecutors declined to pursue charges for threatening a candidate, citing the trio's drug-fueled state and a lack of coherent planning. Still, their presence near the Democratic National Convention with sniper-grade weapons sparked national alarm. In Tennessee, another pair of white supremacists, Paul Schlesselman and Daniel Cowart, took it further. Their plan wasn't just about Obama. It was about carnage. They intended to kill 88 black people, behead 14 of them, and then assassinate Obama by driving at him and firing from their cars. They discussed wearing white tuxedos and top hats during the attack. Cowart, who posted images celebrating Hitler's birthday, had decorated their car with swastikas. They were caught after boasting about shooting at a church window. U.S. Attorney Lawrence Lorenzi said the plot was more than fantasy. They were serious, they were armed, and they had taken steps. Both men pleaded guilty and were sentenced to over a decade in federal prison. The danger wasn't always elaborate. In Charlotte, North Carolina, a man at a Waffle House loudly stated, "Obama needs to be taken out. I can do it in a heartbeat." In Miami, Raymond H. Geisel, attending bail bonds training, was arrested after threatening to assassinate Obama if he got elected. A loaded handgun, combat gear, and tear gas were found in his hotel room. Geisel claimed he was joking. The court didn't agree. He was sentenced to probation. Perhaps the most terrifying discovery came in Maine. James G. Cummings, a white supremacist upset over Obama's election, had begun building a radioactive dirty bomb. FBI agents found uranium, explosives, and a cache of chemicals in his home. His plan died with him. His wife shot him dead after years of domestic abuse. A chilling notebook outlined his bomb plans, which investigators said could have been used at Obama's inauguration. Each plot was stopped before blood was spilled. But the frequency, motive, and methods revealed how visceral racial hatred can trigger violent intent. Even when the gun isn't fired, the threat is real. Always report hostile speech, even if it sounds absurd. Stay aware of your environment. And don't dismiss lone actors, they often move before systems can respond. Some threats end in arrests. Some, in silence. But each one reminds us, the cost of leadership in America is too often paid in bullets or the fear of them. Number 3. George W. Bush. Power can insulate, but not protect. And no title, not even president, makes someone immune to the trigger of rage or revenge. Just 18 days into his presidency, George W. Bush faced his first assassination attempt. On February 7, 2001, former IRS employee Robert W. Pickett fired multiple rounds from just outside the White House fence. His revolver pointed toward the residence, where Bush was reportedly present. "You are guilty of murder," Pickett had written in a suicide note found in his car. The Secret Service responded immediately, shooting him in the knee. Though no one else was injured, the incident prompted urgent questions about how close violence could come to the heart of American power. Pickett later pleaded guilty to firearms charges and entered an Alford plea for assaulting a federal officer. He served 3 years in a medical federal prison. For years later, danger came from across the world. On May 10, 2005, as President Bush addressed a massive crowd in Freedom Square, Tbilisi, Georgia, a live grenade flew through the air. It struck a girl in the head and landed just 61 feet from the stage, where Bush and Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili stood. Miraculously, it failed to explode. The safety lever had been jammed by a red tartan handkerchief. The assailant, Vladimir Aratunian, vanished into the crowd. When finally captured 2 months later, he killed a Georgian Interior Ministry officer during the arrest. "I wanted to hurt Bush because he was too soft on Muslims," Aratunian told investigators. Convicted of murder and attempted assassination, he received a life sentence. The U.S. declined to extradite him. Then, in 2022, a plot surfaced not from a rooftop or rally, but from an immigration loophole. Shihab Ahmed Shihab, an Iraqi man living in Ohio, was arrested for planning a violent operation targeting Bush at his Dallas home and the George W. Bush Institute. With the help of an undercover FBI informant, Shihab conducted surveillance, discussed smuggling in foreign operatives, and envisioned using armor-piercing weapons while disguised in police uniforms. He claimed ties to the late ISIS leader al-Baghdadi and the al-Raid network. The plot was disrupted before it advanced, and Shihab was charged with federal immigration crimes and aiding illegal entry of foreign nationals. Though no shots were fired, intelligence officials warned, this was the sharp departure from the usual lone wolf attacks. And beneath every foiled plot lies a pattern we can't afford to ignore. High-profile targets are watched, so watch the watchers. Radicalization doesn't need a passport, ideology can travel without borders. Complex plots often surface in simple ways: one overheard boast, one suspicious drive-by. 3 different men. 3 vastly different motives. One shared failure, a system that underestimated how far intent can travel before it becomes action. History doesn't always record near misses. But in the silence after an unfired shot, there's a louder question: what happens when the next one isn't stopped? Number 4. Abraham Lincoln. They planned in whispers, moved in shadows, and nearly altered history before a bullet ever found its mark. As Abraham Lincoln made his way to the White House in February 1861, threats were already gathering. The most notorious emerged in Baltimore, a city divided by secessionist tensions. Intelligence gathered by Pinkerton detectives, including undercover agent Kate Warren, indicated that a mob planned to assassinate Lincoln during a public transfer between trains. According to Warren's reports, the plan involved stabbing the president-elect in the crowd. Rather than cancel the trip, Lincoln agreed to travel ahead of schedule under disguise, boarding a night train through Baltimore while wearing a low-brimmed hat and shawl. He arrived safely, but critics later mocked the decision, branding it cowardice. 2 years later, Confederate operatives turned to disease. In 1863, Godfrey Joseph Hyams claimed he was instructed to deliver yellow fever, infected clothing to northern cities, and even to the White House. Though the plot was biologically flawed, yellow fever cannot spread via fabric. It revealed the desperation and innovation of Confederate sabotage efforts. It also hinted at the earliest concept of biological terrorism on American soil. Then, in August 1864, as the Civil War dragged on, Lincoln encountered another brush with death. Riding alone on horseback to the soldier's home at dusk, a gunshot rang out from nearby trees. The bullet missed his skull by inches, piercing his signature stovepipe hat. He returned to the White House shaken but alive, joking to a guard, "Somebody has a curious regard for my hat." There was no arrest, no lead, just a phantom gunman in the Capitol's shadow. April 1865 brought the most coordinated threat. Confederate agent Thomas F. Harney was dispatched to Washington with a mission to blow up the White House using explosives and a secret tunnel entrance, in what he described as an effort to decapitate the Union government. He never made it. A captured Confederate soldier revealed the plan, leading to Harney's arrest en route on April 10th, just 4 days before the eventual assassination. The man who succeeded where others failed was John Wilkes Booth. An acclaimed stage actor and Confederate loyalist, Booth's hatred reached its peak after Lincoln's April 11th speech supporting African American suffrage. That night, Booth told a fellow conspirator, that is the last speech he will ever make. 3 days later, he shot the president inside Ford's Theater. These were not random incidents. They were calculated, ideological, and disturbingly close to success. Some lessons never age. If you think security is overreaction, revisit the silence after near tragedy. Political violence doesn't require chaos, just a moment of blind faith. When ideology becomes obsession, logic becomes expendable. History often records the fatal shot, but the attempts before it, quiet, hidden, and almost successful, are warnings still echoing in the corridors of power. Survival isn't always bravery. Sometimes, it's the quiet work of people you never see, stopping tragedies you'll never know almost happened. Number 5. James A. Garfield. He didn't storm the gates or plant explosives. He just bought a pistol, wrote a letter to God, and waited at a train station. By nightfall, the President of the United States was dying. On July 2, 1881, President James A. Garfield arrived at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C., preparing to leave for a summer speaking tour. There was no security detail, no armored vehicle, just a quiet walk beside his sons and Secretary of State James G. Blaine. That calm shattered when Charles Julius Gutierrez emerged from the crowd with a .442 Webley British Bulldog revolver and fired 2 shots from behind. One bullet grazed Garfield's shoulder. The second lodged deep near his spine, sparking a medical crisis that would spiral out of control for months. Gutierrez wasn't a trained killer or ideologue. He was a failed preacher, disbarred lawyer, and self-proclaimed political operative who had convinced himself that his unsolicited campaign speech had secured Garfield's presidency. When his request for a diplomatic post in Paris was ignored, particularly after Blaine snapped, "Never speak to me again about the consulship," Gutierrez believed divine justice demanded retribution. "I am a stalwart, and Arthur is now president," he proclaimed as he was tackled at the scene. He expected praise. He got handcuffs. Garfield didn't die immediately. For 79 excruciating days, he battled sepsis and starvation, worsened by repeated probing of the wound with unsterilized fingers and metal instruments. Renowned inventor Alexander Graham Bell attempted to locate the bullet with an early metal detector, but interference from the president's bed frame rendered it useless. Doctors restricted the search to one side of Garfield's body, based on a hunch, not science. They were wrong. Garfield's condition deteriorated, and he was moved to Elberon, New Jersey, in hopes that sea air would help. On September 19, 1881, he died, emaciated and exhausted. His autopsy revealed the bullet had caused little direct damage. The real killer? Infection, misdiagnosis, and medical arrogance. Gouteau's trial became a national spectacle. He wrote poetry, serenaded the court, and called himself a man inspired by God. He even blamed the doctors for Garfield's death, claiming, "The doctors murdered him, I only shot him." Despite his insanity plea, the jury deliberated just 1 hour. On June 30, 1882, Gouteau was hanged. He smiled, shook hands with his executioner, and read aloud a religious poem titled, "I Am Going to the Lordy." 3 unflinching truths rose from this tragedy. Entitlement, unchecked, can become delusion. Medical errors can be deadlier than bullets. And the absence of vetting in public service can fuel national disaster. The shock of Garfield's death catalyzed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act of 1883, ending the spoils system and replacing it with merit-based appointments. Ironically, it was the very reform Gouteau opposed. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a collapse of competence, from security to surgery. And long before the fatal shot, the system had already failed. Number 6. William McKinley. He stood in line like everyone else, weapon hidden under a handkerchief. 2 steps forward, a smile, and the shot that silenced the optimism of a new century. On September 6, 1901, President William McKinley arrived at the Temple of Music in Buffalo, New York, for a public reception during the Pan American Exposition. Despite repeated security concerns from his staff, including his private secretary George Cortelyou, McKinley insisted on maintaining his tradition of accessibility. "Let them come," he said. "They mean no harm." That belief would cost him his life. As the president greeted a steady flow of citizens, 28-year-old Leon Zalgas stepped forward with a revolver concealed beneath a white cloth. When McKinley reached for his left hand, seeing the right was covered, Zalgas fired twice at point-blank range. 1 bullet ricocheted off a button. The second tore through McKinley's abdomen, slicing through his stomach, damaging his pancreas and kidney, and lodging deep inside his back muscles. The crowd erupted. James Parker, an African-American man standing behind Zalgas, punched the assassin, preventing a third shot. Soldiers and Secret Service agents tackled Zalgas, beating him severely until McKinley himself pleaded, "Go easy on him, boys." The president was rushed to the Exposition Hospital, woefully unequipped for such trauma. Dr. Matthew D. Mann, a gynecologist with no experience in abdominal surgery, was the only available physician. The bullet could not be located. Despite signs of early recovery, McKinley's condition worsened due to undiagnosed infection. On September 14, 1901, at 2:15 a.m., he died of gangrene-induced sepsis. Leon Zalgas, a disillusioned anarchist and son of Polish immigrants, believed he was eliminating a tyrant. Influenced by the fiery rhetoric of anarchist Emma Goldman and inspired by the assassination of Italy's King Umberto I, Zalgas viewed McKinley as a symbol of capitalist oppression. "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people," he declared during his interrogation. He showed no remorse. His trial began on September 23, just 9 days after McKinley's death. Zalgas refused to cooperate with his defense team. The jury found him guilty after only 30 minutes of deliberation. He was sentenced to death and executed in the electric chair on October 29, 1901. His final words, "I am not sorry for my crime. I am sorry I could not see my father." The nation mourned. Thousands lined the tracks of McKinley's funeral train. Across cities, businesses shuddered in collective grief. But behind the mourning, 3 hard truths crystallized. No public office is safe without protection. Radical ideas, left unchecked, can incubate in silence. And in moments of crisis, medical preparedness is as vital as any law. McKinley's death forever altered presidential security. Within months, Congress tasked the Secret Service with permanent executive protection, a change born from tragedy. In the space of a handshake, a country was reminded, proximity to power is a privilege and a risk. Number 7. John F. Kennedy. He waved to cheering crowds under the Texas sun. Seconds later, the nation froze, not by a foreign threat, but by a rifle fired from a window 6 stories above. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy rode through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. It was a campaign stop, part of a political effort to unify a fractured Democratic Party ahead of the 1964 election. Sitting beside him was First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, just in front, Texas Governor John Connally and his wife. As their motorcade turned onto Elm Street, shots rang out from the Texas School Book Depository. The assassin, 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald, was a former Marine, disillusioned Marxist, and recent defector to the Soviet Union. From a sixth-floor window, Oswald used a bolt-action Italian Carcano M91/38 rifle to fire 3 rounds. One missed. The second struck Kennedy in the upper back, exited through his neck, and wounded Governor Connally. The third hit Kennedy in the head, shattering his skull and killing him almost instantly. Kennedy was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, but doctors quickly recognized the hopelessness of his condition. He was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Meanwhile, Oswald fled the scene, killing Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit in Oak Cliff before being arrested in a nearby movie theater. During his brief time in custody, Oswald claimed, "I'm just a patsy." 2 days later, while being transferred to the county jail, Oswald was shot on live television by Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with reported mob connections. The murder unfolded before a stunned national audience, further clouding the narrative. The Warren Commission concluded Oswald acted alone, relying on ballistic evidence and eyewitness accounts to support the controversial single bullet theory. But public skepticism was immediate and enduring. Conspiracy theories emerged, ranging from CIA plots and mafia retaliation to Soviet or Cuban involvement. The inconsistencies in the autopsy, missing brain tissue, and altered timelines fueled the belief that more lay beneath the surface. Oswald, a solitary figure with grand illusions of political relevance, died without trial. Ruby, initially sentenced to death, died of cancer before retrial. The unanswered questions they left behind became a permanent fixture of American lore. In the aftermath, key reforms were implemented. The Secret Service overhauled presidential security, eliminating open motorcades, expanding protection protocols, and adopting counter-sniper measures. Public mistrust in government surged, leading to the 1993 JFK Records Act, mandating full transparency over assassination records. And the 25th Amendment clarified presidential succession in times of crisis. From this tragedy, a set of warnings emerged. No amount of popularity shields against violent ideology. A lone individual with conviction can dismantle national order in seconds. And in the vacuum of clear truth, conspiracies thrive. This was not just the loss of a leader, it was the end of an age. 3 shots ended more than a presidency. They ended an era and started 1,000 questions still echoing today. Number 8. Ronald Reagan. He wasn't shouting, waving signs, or trying to force his way forward. He simply waited, calm and unnoticed, with a revolver in his coat and an obsession boiling just beneath the surface. March 30th, 1981. President Ronald Reagan had just finished addressing Union leaders at the Washington Hilton Hotel. As he exited through a private corridor known as President's Walk, cheers echoed from the press and onlookers gathered behind a rope line. Reagan stepped toward his limousine, smiling. Just 15 feet away, John Hinckley Jr. stood in silence, watching, waiting. Hinckley, 25, had arrived in D.C. 2 days earlier. His motive wasn't political. It was personal, driven by a delusion that assassinating the president would impress actress Jodie Foster. Obsessed with Taxi Driver, Hinckley saw himself as the film's troubled protagonist. He wrote to Foster hours before the attack, "This will be the greatest love offering in the history of the world." At 2:27 p.m., he fired 6 shots in 1.7 seconds. The first bullet struck Press Secretary James Brady above the left eye. The second hit Officer Thomas Delahanty in the neck. The fourth pierced Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy's chest. The final bullet ricocheted off the limousine and entered Reagan's underarm, cracking a rib, puncturing a lung, and stopping less than an inch from his heart. At first, Reagan believed his ribs were broken from being shoved into the limo. Then he coughed up bright, frothy blood, a sign of a punctured lung. Agent Jerry Parr made a split-second decision. They diverted to George Washington University Hospital. Despite immense blood loss, Reagan walked into the ER under his own power, joking to surgeons, "Please tell me you're all Republicans." Surgeons performed emergency thoracotomy. The bullet was successfully removed, and Reagan survived barely. James Brady, however, was left with lifelong brain damage. His death in 2014 was ruled a homicide from the original gunshot wound. Hinckley was tackled at the scene by agents and bystanders. During the trial, his defense presented extensive psychiatric history, including schizophrenia and narcissistic personality disorder. On June 21, 1982, a jury found him not guilty by reason of insanity. Public outrage followed, sparking immediate legal reforms to limit the use of the insanity defense. The attack also changed how presidents were protected. Open motorcade arrivals ended. The Secret Service expanded tactical training, added sniper teams, and implemented new perimeter control protocols. Reagan never walked publicly without armor again. Some lessons are branded into national memory. Even proximity within policy boundaries can be a lethal risk. Mental illness left unchecked can reshape history. Delusions, no matter how absurd, become deadly when mixed with opportunity. Hinckley was released under supervision in 2016. Reagan returned to office just weeks after surgery. But the sound of those 6 shots still echoes in Secret Service training rooms and in the consciousness of a country reminded that danger doesn't always wear a warning label. Number 9. Franklin D. Roosevelt. A folding chair, a small pistol, and a man with nothing to lose. That was all it took to nearly alter the course of American history before it even began. February 15, 1933. Franklin D. Roosevelt, President-elect of the United States, had just returned from a Caribbean cruise. That night, he appeared at Bayfront Park in Miami to greet supporters. Standing in the back of his open Buick, he delivered a short speech to the crowd. Unknown to them all, Giuseppe Zangara, a 33-year-old Italian immigrant, was just steps away, standing on a wobbly metal chair, clutching a cheap .32 caliber revolver bought for $8 at a pawn shop. Zangara, a 5 feet 1 inch bricklayer suffering from years of chronic stomach pain, wasn't there for Roosevelt's policies. He was there because he hated all presidents, kings, and capitalists, blaming them for his misery. As the crowd cheered, Zangara raised his weapon and fired 5 times. The shots missed Roosevelt but struck 5 others. Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak took a bullet to the abdomen. He collapsed, groaning, "I'm hit." Roosevelt, refusing to leave the scene, ordered his driver to take the wounded to the hospital. Cermak lay in Roosevelt's arms en route to Jackson Memorial. The president-elect's calm response would later be credited with keeping Cermak alive for a time. Cermak died 19 days later from peritonitis caused by the wound. The others survived: a police officer, a woman from Florida Power and Light, a nightclub entertainer, and a detective. One woman, Lillian Cross, had pushed Zangara's arm just before the shots. Her split-second act may have saved the president-elect's life. Zangara was arrested immediately. "I kill kings and presidents first," he declared. "Next all capitalists." In court, he pled guilty, first to attempted murder and later to murder after Cermak's death. Judge Yulee Thompson sentenced him to death by electrocution. Zangara refused appeals, even yelling "push the button," before his execution on March 20, 1933, just 33 days after the attempt. No evidence ever confirmed a broader conspiracy, but some speculated Cermak, not Roosevelt, was the real target. Chicago Mafia theories circulated for decades, yet no link to organized crime was ever proven. Doctors later refuted claims that medical error caused Cermak's death. Zangara's execution was swift, his motive hauntingly personal. He wasn't aligned with a political movement. He was a loner with a revolver, shaped by suffering and rage. The aftermath offers lasting warnings. Even casual public events can turn deadly in seconds. Untreated mental and physical pain can radicalize the desperate. Everyday citizens like Lillian Cross can shift the outcome of history. America remembers FDR's poise and Zangara's fury, but not all dangers give warnings. Sometimes, all they need is a crowd, a chair, and a clear shot. Number 10. Theodore Roosevelt. A steel eyeglass case, a folded speech, and sheer willpower stood between one man and death. On that October night, a bullet met resistance, but history met defiance. October 14, 1912, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt had just finished dinner at the Gilpatrick Hotel. Outside, crowds cheered as he stepped into an open car en route to deliver a campaign speech as the Progressive Party's presidential nominee. Among them was John Flaming Schrank, a 36-year-old Bavarian-born saloonkeeper who had tracked Roosevelt across 8 states, driven by voices only he could hear. Just 5 feet away, he raised a Colt revolver and fired once. The bullet hit Roosevelt squarely in the chest. But instead of collapsing, Roosevelt remained standing. The shot had passed through his steel eyeglasses case, and a thick, folded 50-page speech titled "The Progressive Cause Greater Than Any Individual," absorbing much of the bullet's momentum. "I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot," Roosevelt told the shocked audience upon arrival at the auditorium. "But it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." For nearly an hour, Roosevelt continued his address, blood seeping through his shirt. Only afterward did he agree to be examined by doctors. The bullet had lodged near his rib, but not in his lung. Medical staff decided against surgery. It would remain inside him for the rest of his life. Schrenk was immediately subdued by Roosevelt's aide Elbert E. Martin and nearby bystanders. Roosevelt, still bleeding, stopped the crowd from harming the assailant. "Don't hurt him. Bring him here. I want to see him," he ordered. In custody, Schrenk told authorities he had been instructed by the ghost of President William McKinley to prevent Roosevelt from seeking a third term. He was quickly ruled insane. A court-appointed panel diagnosed him with paranoid delusions and declared him unfit to stand trial. Schrenk was confined to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Wisconsin. He never received a visitor in the 31 years before his death from pneumonia in 1943. Though Roosevelt survived, the attempt marked a pivotal moment in American politics. His stoic reaction became legendary, reinforcing his image as a rugged, fearless leader. While he ultimately lost the election to Woodrow Wilson, his handling of the crisis left an enduring legacy of composure under fire. In retrospect, the incident laid bare urgent truths. Crowds offer no guarantee of safety. Even peaceful moments can mask lethal intent. Paranoia and untreated delusions, left unchecked, may cross the thin line into violence. Sometimes, survival hinges not on force or planning, but on pure chance. Leadership is not only tested by policies and polls, but by how one responds when staring down a smoking gun. Roosevelt's bullet-torn speech became more than campaign material. It became an artifact of fortitude. And in that bloodstained hour, character outweighed calamity. History doesn't always scream. It whispers through missed shots, failed plots, and men who almost rewrote the fate of a nation. From rooftops to rallies, from obsession to ideology, these assassination attempts weren't just brushes with death. They were warning signs carved into the American timeline. And if the past tells us anything, it's this: the next threat may already be watching, waiting, blending in. Want to know what happened behind the headlines? What almost slipped through the cracks? Hit subscribe Justice Reversed and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in the hidden history of power, paranoia, and pursuit. Because sometimes, the story that matters most is the one that almost ended.